Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, I'm going to be going over my Temporal Forces buy list. The set is coming out on the 22nd of March and will be legal for the EUIC, obviously alongside rotation as well. Bear that in mind when you are thinking and considering your deck choice. But let's start things off with those core essentials. These are cards that I expect to be involved in tier 1 or 2 contenders or have obvious future potential. We'll start off on the left-hand side of the screen here with the Buddy Puffin. This is a phenomenal item card that all sorts of evolving decks will require, not only in the immediate future, but also going forwards for a number of years. Most likely this is going to be our optimal ball search option, so definitely a no-brainer, 4 count there. We have some very nice versatile ace specs, so I think even if you're not committing to one single deck right now, I would look towards getting at least these 3 ace spec cards. Prime Catcher, Phenomenal Gust. This is basically the first card on the list until you find a way to justify a different ace spec, so this is going to be in all sorts of decks. For some current specifics, playing Prime Catcher right now, we've got Charizard Barrel, we've got Lost Box, we've got Goldengo, Chempao, just to name a few. And this is, like I said, a very, very high quality general use ace spec that will find its way into all sorts of lists. Similar for Maximum Belt, a little bit more specific towards decks that need that damage modifier to hit crucial thresholds. Right now, we see a lot of Charizard Pidgeot builds aim to use this card, as well as Arceus builds. So if you are thinking of going towards one of those archetypes, I'd definitely consider the Maximum Belt, but it has shown up in other deck lists as well. Hero's Cape, pretty much the defensive option. So if you are someone who likes playing stall, control, or other grindy style decks, the Hero's Cape could be good for you. If you still believe in Gardevoir, even though it loses so much to rotation, this is also a premium choice for them. And it has found its way into some Lugia lists, some Charizard builds as well, every now and then. I think in the Champions League, best performing Charizard Pidgeot actually played this, even though the vast majority play one of these other 2 ace specs over here. So Hero's Cape does show up in archetypes every now and then, so it's definitely a worthy pickup. On to our supporters then. The Cryptomaniac's a really solid option where you can stack the deck for 2 cards, and we have so many means of accessing those 2 cards immediately. The Barrel Engines are in a ton of archetypes. We have Radiant Greninja in all sorts of decks, of course, as well, and even Pokestops. So even on turn 1, if you have one of these other synergy cards, you actually can get activation of this card. So it seems, even though Research, Iono, and other crucial supporters are going to be still in the limelight, I do think the Cryptomaniac is going to be a decent, like, tertiary supporter to put into your deck to increase your overall counts. It's a similar story to Morty's Conviction. This is never going to be like the best supporter in your deck list, but it does offer some extra discard synergy, can draw a decent number of cards if your opponent goes 1 on the board, so every now and then it's going to show up as an additional supporter. Eerie is a massive, massive pickup for controlling style decks. If you like playing your Snorlax block decks, if you're looking towards playing the new Great Tusk archetype, and even it's been splashable enough to find its way into a number of Arceus builds, sometimes even some Charizard builds play this as well. So Eerie is a really disruptive, frustrating supporter that could be in high counts in controlling archetypes, but could be a tech 1 or 2 counts in general use decks as well. Next up, we have Emergency Board. It's a really handy tool. I definitely think if you're someone who likes playing Lost Zone archetypes or has in the past, this is a really nice pickup. And just because we have great search from Town Store and Arven in format, other archetypes can easily justify just having 1 or 2 copies in their deck list if they have a number of single retreat cost Pokemon within the list. Even though Iron Leaves EX is a future Pokemon and could well make it in a sort of future-style toolbox as a grass-attacking threat, it has seen play in all sorts of decks, actually. It's made its way into a number of Lost Zone variants, it's made its way into Arc Giratina, and it's made its way into Lost Zone Giratina, which actually has been upticking in more recent City Leagues. Not only is it a great grass-type attacker to help deal with Charizard, of course, for a 2-for-2 trade, but it's also another Pokemon that can throw itself into the active position, giving all these decks additional outs to help out against these quad counter-catcher Snorlax and Great Tusk decks. The Iron Leaves acts as a pseudo-switching card within your list as well. Next up, we have the Hand Clippers. It can reduce hand sizes down, so it could be pretty interesting for the Great Tusk milling archetype coming out from this set. Could be okay in a number of Snorlax builds as well, because you have such a heavy Arven package within that deck. You can cherry pick the right time to use the Hand Clippers and disrupt your opponent if they're trying to hold on to a number of key resources. And every now and then, because other archetypes play Arven or just have robust draw engines with like Squirtle, the Barrel or whatnot, you could consider a Hand Clippers just to punish some decks that love to grow large hand hand sizes. I actually don't think there's that many of them in the format right now, but I do think this is still a really powerful option to have going into the future sets. Next up, I think Mist Energy is a great pickup. I'm going for quite the high count of 3, mostly for Lugia players wanting to incorporate more colorless energy within their deck list. This obviously helps protect around Giratina's V-Star Power, Roaring Moon, TM Devolution as well can be pretty handy, and also Sableye. That's been showing up certainly in Lugia builds, but also Arceus and Charizard builds have picked this up as like a 1 or 2 count as well, so it seems to be a very versatile and important card right now. Then we come on to the sort of high tier packages of cards that we can gain in this set. First of all, we have the 3 Chinchino as well as Master Ball. We've seen this A-Spec as well as Chinchino, the new attacker, both show up in Lugia, and the Chinchino essentially just becomes the big selling point as to why Lugia could be coming back into the format, for being this fantastic means of uptrading. If you're able to commit enough energy onto it and get turn attachments and whatnot, this can be a monster beat stick that your opponent basically can't ignore if they are playing a multi-prize deck. So this is a really, really awesome card. You don't need to pick up any Mincino for this one unless you don't have any of the old Brilliant Stars one. That is the optimal choice for Mincino that we have in the format right now, because it does offer a single colorless energy call for family attack, which is going to be handy in the deck as well. Even though Master Ball has just edged it over A-Specs within the Lugia archetype, if you're not picking up Lugia, I wouldn't rush to pick up that Master Ball. It's typically going to be a lower power level than some of the others that I've already talked about, but it is worth it in the Lugia list right now. Next up, we have the sort of future package. The Heavy Baton pretty much only works on Iron Hands right now. It's specific to 4 retreat costing Pokemon, and Iron Hands EX is pretty much the best selling point card that we have available for this, but it is a great means of retaining energy across your board and maintaining attackers, which is a really important thing to have. So even if you're not looking to play the sort of quad Iron Hands deck going into this format, you may still want to pick up a couple Heavy Baton. The Reboot Pod is mostly found within the Iron Hands list. Sometimes you see Prime Catcher within the 60, but certainly if you're looking to play a future style toolbox that has slightly more energy options and different attacking threats available to it, the Reboot Pod is a really important aspect to have within that 60. Iron Crown is the damage mod of the deck, so you do need to have high counts of these because your board is going to be filled with them, and the Numeraidon is a fantastic early game attacking beat stick that can initiate a prize race with a 1 prize Pokemon, whilst also accelerating to your high energy attackers on the bench, which is what the deck's all about. And then finally, we have the sort of ancient package of cards. So firstly, we have the Explorer's Guidance. It's going to be a 4 count in both a Great Tusk milling archetype, but also the ancient box starring the Roaring Moon as that sort of fantastic late game attacker that you're building towards throughout the game. I've then gone for 4 counts of the Roaring Moon, the Great Tusk, the Fluttermane, and the Koraidon. If you don't want to play Great Tusk Mill and already know that, you can get lower counts of Great Tusk. I'd probably pick up just 1 or 2 copies, but getting 4 copies of the Great Tusk will of course be essential if you're looking to play the milling variant. The Drum of Awakening would be a pickup only if you're looking to play the Roaring Moon base build. It's not so handy in the Great Tusk list. They will often opt to use the Hero's Cape instead, but this is a really influential card for the Roaring Moon archetype. Could also be solid in the Raging Bolt EX deck if you believe in that list a little bit more than I do right now. Onto the Believer buy list then. These are cards that may prove themselves to be mid-tier contenders or have a good amount of potential. We'll start off with a handful of future cards that could end up getting into the toolbox. First of all, Miraidon EX has a decent damage output, 2 energy attacks, certainly if you are weaving in Iron Valiant within your future build, and for 3 energy you hit that 220 threshold. That's before all your damage mods, so this can be a great way to reach into V-Star range with the help of your Iron Crowns and Future Booster Energy Capsule. And it already has Lightning plus Psychic within its attack cost, and that does have decent synergy with certainly Iron Hands, Valiant, and Crown, which are already kind of the stars of the show of a future deck, so it's not too much work to weave in this Miraidon EX. Interestingly enough, Iron Boulder EX has found its way as a tech one of in the quad Iron Hands builds. It's a bit of work, it's a bit of space to commit to have this card as well as basic fighting energy in your deck list, which makes me a little bit skeptical because I want to have the maximum ratios to just hit my generators within that build, because that 60 is so relentlessly tied to its prize race via the Iron Hands chaining. But the upside of the Iron Boulder is fighting type coverage, could be reasonable for mirror match situations, but also fantastic against the Arceus players, especially because they have no easy way of getting a response KO, and even if they do, that Repulsor Axe attack places 8 counters back on the attacking Pokemon that could then set you up for your Iron Hands throughout the remainder of the game, so you only really need 1 or 2 copies at most to completely swing the Arceus matchup. Similar story here with the Iron Treads. It's both metal and fighting type, as long as it has that Future Booster Energy Capsule attached to it, so it could be another way of offsetting that prize race against Arceus builds. Also could be handy against Chempow EX if you expect that to be really popular. And then we have the Lightning single prize Iron Hands. I think Iron Hands EX is typically going to be the go-to option, but this could be an alternate means of uptrading into Lightning weak Pokemon. Salvatore is a scary supporter card that could ramp turn 1 item lock or other disruptive attacks in the game, so if you are someone who likes to get experimental with those sorts of options, I do think picking 4 of these up up is for you. Dangerous Jungle is a spiritual reprint of Verbank City Gym, which was a really playable card back in the day. And I do think in the right deck, if Poison gets more support, this could be a very powerful card. So getting 4 of these for the binder seems reasonable. And the Full Metal Lab could be justified within Goldengo and Dialga V-Star builds. It is somewhat of a passive stadium card, but it does give you a little bit more bulk and push you out of that crucial 280 threshold, which many decks look to hit. There's also the Relic Out Tech card, which unlocks the attacks of your pre-evolutions. Right now, there aren't many high-tier synergies for this Relic Out, so I don't think it's worth carving a space in your deck list for this card in many current archetypes in the game. Then we have a few ancient cards. The Raging Bolt EX has built-in consistency with that Burst Roar and can one-hit KO things and has a natural base of 240 hit points with no weakness. There's so many great stats on the Raging Bolt EX, but it does just seem a little bit slower / clunkier than the likes of Roaring Moon EX as an aggressive 2-prize archetype. The Sandy Shocks essentially only makes it into the Raging Bolt EX deck, so I'd pick up a couple copies if you believe in this archetype. Dunsparce is a really interesting ability, and it can give you some good on-board draw power and some protection against Iono. It's not as spammable as Bibarel though, so I do think it is sort of in its shadow right now. The main upside of Dunsparce is that firstly, your basic has free retreat, but also the Dunsparce essentially becomes a pivot as well. You can always promote this at the start of turn and throw it into the deck to just draw additional cards once you've seen your top deck and can make some other decisions based on that. It also means that if you're coming up against Great Tusk or the Snorlax blocking archetype, they don't have an easy target, which they would do if you were playing a Bibarel engine. For Gouging Fire EX, I think it's way too much work to sort of invest fully into an archetype like this, having like 3 or 4 copies of the card, because it is so much work to get that high energy attack cost rolling, and 260 still means you need to add additional damage modifiers to actually make it a useful attack. But I do want to give Gouging Fire some credit for being a decent early tempo option for the Charizard players, especially if they're looking to play Prime Catcher instead of Maximum Belt, and it gives you a Pokemon without an ability that can one-hit KO a Alolan Vulpix V-Star, which did get second at the Champions League and still is worth respecting. Ferrotheric EX offers a annoying ability where it protects itself from basic EX Pokemon, which does cover somewhat of the format, but typically there are gaps right now where there are already single prize attacking Pokemon or some Vs in the format. It may be way down the line when Vs actually rotate that Ferrotheric has its time in the sun, but I do think this ability is something to keep an eye on. Metang offers fantastic energy acceleration and could be a great option certainly for Dialga V-Star. The optimal Beldum comes from Silver Tempest unless you want to have an extra 10 hit points from the one coming out in the new set. And then finally we end on Feraligatr. It can hit the crucial 280 threshold on a single prize Pokemon, which is certainly tempting. Even though you are a stage 2, you're an Irida engine, so in theory you should be able to maintain your stage 2 line relatively easily. It's a bit of work though, it does have a 2 energy attack cost, so there are vulnerabilities and clunk going on with the 60, which I think holds it back from being a high tier archetype. That's it then for the Temporal Forces buy list. Let me know which from the Believer list you're going to be trying out. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow for another one. Cheers.